In today's episode, we look at the Cullen Brothers. Twins Leon and Anthony were at the helm of one of the most formidable organised crime groups in the UK, operating primarily out of Warrington, Cheshire. Their criminal enterprise, often likened to the infamous Cray twins of the 1960s, was characterised by the extensive trafficking, arms dealing, and the use of violence to maintain control and instill fear. This is Curios&Spiritual. Let me take you through the rise and fall of the formidable Cullen Brothers. In the world of organised crime, some names echo through the annals of infamy. The Cray twins of London, the Adams family of Islington, and in more recent years, the Cullen Brothers of Warrington. Leon and Anthony Cullen weren't just local dealers, they were the architects of a sophisticated, violent criminal enterprise that at its height flooded the UK northwest with high purity Class A product and fear. From a humble beginning in a working class area of Cheshire, the Cullen Brothers rose to dominate the Warrington streets to expand their influence far beyond. Their gang wasn't just about dealing, it was about hierarchy, loyalty, brutality, and the kind of organisation that would make even seasoned police shudder. Between them, they ran one of the most profitable and militarised dealing syndicates ever seen in the northwest. At the height of their power, their enterprise raked in nearly £300,000 every single month. Guns, cash and kilos of Class A flowed through the region. Their network stretched from Liverpool and Manchester to Wales and the northeast. Their operations were supported by a bunch of enforcers, money launderers and lieutenants, all taking their orders from the Cullen Brothers. But power like that doesn't last forever. In the largest and most complex investigation Cheshire police have ever mounted, Operation Samurai, the Cullen Empire began to crack. Raids, surveillance, seizures and arrests followed, leading to one of the brothers behind bars and the other fleeing the country under a fake passport. What followed next was a chase across borders, a dramatic capture in Dubai, and eventual extradition. To understand the Cullen Brothers, we must first understand Warrington and the environment that created them. Leon and Anthony Cullen were born in 1987 in Warrington, a town nestled between major cities of Liverpool and Manchester. Though technically in Cheshire, Warrington sits close enough to Merseyside and Greater Manchester that ripples the effects of those cities, underworlds, were always within arm's reach. The brothers were raised in Longford, a district in the north side of town. Longford had its share of socio-economic challenges. The Cullen household was neither rich nor desperately poor, but they weren't immune to the realities of working class life. Few prospects, limited opportunities, and the ever-present temptation of street money. People who knew them in their youth would later describe the two brothers in sharply different terms. Anthony, the older of the two by minutes, was known to be charismatic, calm and level-headed. Friends recalled him as popular, someone who could get along with anyone. Teachers saw potential in him, and he often kept out of trouble, at least on the surface. Leon, by contrast, was a firebrand, volatile, intense, and prone to aggression. He was the one with the short fuse and a growing obsession with power. Those who encountered Leon during the teenage years described a young man who was both a real laugh and outright dangerous, a potent combination that would come to define him. Despite their personality differences, the Cullen twins were inseparable. They had an unbreakable brotherly bond and shared ambitions beyond what Longford could offer. What they craved, whether they knew it at the time or not, was status. They weren't born into crime, their parents weren't gangsters, but the streets of Warrington were a crucible, especially in the late 1990s and early 2000s. The northwest dealing trade was booming, with turf wars erupting in Manchester and Liverpool, spilling outward. The Cullen twins came of age in an environment where Class A Charlie was increasingly available, and the people who sold it looked mint. They wore designer clothes and drove BMWs, nearly always M3s or M5s. And they noticed. Wanting what the dealers had, they had status and were respected. They were like movie stars. As teenagers, they dabbled in petty crime, shoplifting, joyriding, small-time weed deals, but their ambitions quickly grew. By the age of 18, they had their sights set on bigger prizes. Class A Charlie was the obvious choice. The profits were immense, and the logistics, if you had the right contacts, were not out of reach. The Cullen Brothers weren't the first to make that leap, but they were among the most ruthless in how they scaled it. Watching other dealers fail became a massive learning experience. They began forging connections, first locally and then with suppliers in Liverpool underworld. It was there they started to understand the business, how to source high-grade product, how to cut and distribute it, how to manage risk. Their natural charisma opened doors. Their willingness to use violence kept them open. By their early 20s, they stepped fully into the role of gang leaders. They weren't just selling Class A products anymore, they were organising it. They set up early networks of runners, lookouts and lieutenants. They understood the importance of staying off the radar for now. It wasn't about the flashiness in the beginning, it was about building infrastructure. And then they hit their first major growth phase. They created a front business, Spot on Signs, to launder proceeds from their product sales. But this wasn't your average hole-in-the-wall shell company. The Cullen Brothers ran it like an actual business, tracking debts on spreadsheets, managing inventory, and keeping detailed accounts of money owed to them by street-level dealers. By 2010, they were already pulling in hundreds of thousands of pounds, but they also attracted the attention of Cheshire Police, who launched an investigation called Operation Cortex. That would be the brothers' first major fall from grace. By 2010, Leon and Anthony Cullen were no longer just ambitious small-town dealers. They were now operating a high-volume Class A distribution network in Warrington and surrounding regions. They had cars, cash, connections, and a growing reputation for control and intimidation. Police soon became aware of the front company Spot on Signs, presented the outward image of legitimate success. It was a printing and signage business on paper, but behind closed doors it was a financial smokescreen for a well-oiled narcotics operation. According to the seized documents later, used as evidence in court, they kept meticulous records. Dealers who owed them money were listed by name, alongside the amounts due, some in tens of thousands of pounds. This wasn't a chaotic street crew, it was an enterprise. But success breeds attention, and not just from rivals. In late 2010, Cheshire Police began building a covert operation aimed at dismantling the Cullen operation, codenamed Operation Cortex. The investigation relied on surveillance, informants, and undercover officers, piecing together the details of how Class A was being moved through the region. The scale of it quickly shocked investigators. Over a 6-month period, the gang had distributed over at least 5 kilograms of Class A Charlie, with a street value of over £300,000. They weren't working out of dingy back streets, they had storage units, safe houses, and mobile burners to manage logistics. Couriers would collect from suppliers, usually brought in from Merseyside, and distribute them through a carefully structured local chain. No messing about, no muppets. They used people who had been doing this for years. The Cullen Brothers were never seen at the deals. They learned early to keep their hands clean, staying several steps removed from street-level transactions. But police were watching and listening. In a series of raids in early 2011, police executed warrants on multiple properties. Officers recovered large quantities of Class A product, cash, burner phones, and detailed ledgers. Among those arrested were key members of the Cullen gang, men who had handled money, security, transportation and sales. Leon Cullen was arrested and later convicted of charges of conspiracy to supply Class A in court. Prosecutors painted a clear picture. Leon had run the operation, coordinated supply lines, and reaped in the profits. In one exchange recovered from a gang member's phone, Leon reportedly demanded full payment from a dealer who had fallen behind. Sort this money today, or you're done. There was no ambiguity in his threats. Leon was sentenced to 9 years and 8 months in prison. His brother Anthony was arrested during Operation Cortex, but not at first. In Leon's absence, Anthony stepped up to take over the gang activities, but this was no weaker sibling. Anthony, level-headed, was more ruthless thinking, several steps ahead, but the police were ready. Within a year, a second operation, Operation Knock, was launched to follow up on the leads uncovered during Cortex. This time, they were after Anthony and the remnants of the Cullen network. What they found was both sophisticated and bold: a fully functioning Class A Charlie factory hidden inside a caravan on a site in Rixton, Warrington. Inside, officers discovered processing equipment, digital scales, blocks of high purity product, mixing agents and vacuum sealers. It was a clandestine production hub, allowing the gang to dilute and package the stuff in bulk, maximising profits and reducing exposure from outside suppliers. Anthony was arrested at the site. In court, the evidence was overwhelming. He pleaded guilty and received 5.5 years in prison. Alongside him, multiple members of the gang also sentenced, including couriers, packagers and enforcers. It appeared, at least for a while, that the Cullen Empire had crumbled. But the prison walls were not the end of their story. The Cullen Brothers did their time and learned from it. They didn't waste a single day. Most criminals either disappear in obscurity after a conviction or fall back into crime with no real strategy. I have seen it, and so have you. Almost like running into a wall at full speed. But the Cullens were different, and by the time they were both released in the mid-2010s, they'd developed a blueprint, a smarter, more expansive version of their previous business. This time, they'd go bigger, more professional, and far more violent. They re-entered the criminal world with precision. Their new operation was designed to avoid mistakes of the past, avoid personal exposure, build layers of protection, and outsource the most visible elements of the dealing trade. They began sourcing Class A products on a much larger scale, with connections believed to link them to international traffickers in mainland Europe and Colombian networks through contacts in Liverpool and Manchester. Their product was of a consistently higher purity, which gave them a massive competitive edge in an already saturated market, with other dealers cutting product with baking powder and all the other types of stuff you find in the supermarket to stretch profit. And instead of just Warrington, they now expanded their influence into North Wales, Greater Manchester, Merseyside and the North East. At the core of the new Cullen cartel was a strict hierarchy, with Leon as director and strategist, rarely ever dealing directly with the product. Anthony managed personnel and security. A dozen trusted lieutenants handling movement, storage and logistics, enforcers who ensured compliance through threats, violence or worse. The gang was making up to £290,000 a month, operating with business-like efficiency. Members were paid wages, including regular salaries, bonuses for performance and housing. There were rules, there were penalties, and there was always fear. A professional business-like gang complete with a monthly wage bill of £50,000, plus bonuses of up to £10,000. There was a 20-strong gang. Leon splashed his cash on a Maserati, as his outfit supplied more than 50 kilograms of Class A. To launder the money, they launched Future Press Limited, a promotional goods company on paper. It processed large sums in the guise of marketing materials and brand clothing, just like spot-on signs before it. Future Press allowed the Cullens to inject large volumes of criminal proceeds into the legitimate company, including mortgage payments, car purchases, and other luxury items. But the money wasn't their only weapon. The Cullen gang stockpiled a terrifying arsenal of firearms, an AK-47 assault rifle, multiple automatic pistols and revolvers, pump-action shotguns, silencers, ammunition caches, stashed in lockups around Warrington. These weren't just for defence, they were used to intimidate rivals, enforce debts and protect territory. Police would later describe the Cullen gang as one of the most heavily armed they had ever encountered in Cheshire. The brothers had gone from mid-level street players to militarised crime bosses in less than a decade. But with that scale came the scrutiny. It doesn't go unnoticed. Yeah, the criminal underworld, as we covered before, who gossip more than two old dears at the bus stop, and with police criminal intelligence noting the high purity gear on the street. In 2016, the police quietly launched the biggest operation of all. By 2016, Leon and Auntie Cullen were at the peak of their criminal empire. They were operating a vast dealer network across the northwest of England, Wales, and the northeast, funneling Class A product through trusted contacts and laundering their profits with chilling professionalism. Their network functioned like a corporation, but it was powered by violence and fear, not shareholder reports. The Cullens believed they were untouchable, but they had severely underestimated the scope and patience of the police. Inside the offices of Chester Constabulary, a highly confidential project was already underway, known as Operation Samurai. It had become the most complex and resource-intensive criminal investigation the forces have conducted. The mission? Dismantle the Cullen Brothers' empire permanently. Operation Samurai began quietly. Intelligence had been building since late 2015 from several sources: informants inside prison, surveillance footage, intercepted messages, and anonymous tips. Police analysts had begun connecting dots between increasing firearms activity in Cheshire and known associates of the Cullen Brothers. The decision was made: a covert investigation would target the entire Cullen network, and not just its leaders. This was not going to be a quick bust. It required months of surveillance, data gathering, financial tracking, and forensic evidence collection. Police had to be absolutely sure, not just to catch the Cullens, but to ensure their case would hold up in court against some of the most experienced criminal defence solicitors in the UK. Detectives tapped into phone lines. They followed couriers across motorways. Undercover officers recorded meetings, handovers, and exchanges. They watched as kilograms of product moved from secure stash houses to street-level dealers. And then as the cash flowed in the opposite direction, up the pyramid to the Cullen Brothers. They also monitored lieutenants like Christopher Potter, one of the most trusted couriers, Sean Ryan, an enforcer known for carrying bullets as warnings, Nigel Girk, who was caught with £43,000 in a sports bag after a crash. The gang operates out of residential houses, safe flats, and industrial units. Members use encrypted phones and regularly change vehicles to avoid detection. Yet even with these precautions, the surveillance net tightened. A major turning point came in July 2017. Officers acting on surveillance data searched a house in Oxford Street in Warrington, and they discovered a handgun wrapped in clinger film, intended for sale to a contact in Liverpool. The next day, police raided another property on Rylands Drive, where they discovered 5 firearms hidden in a loft, including revolvers, automatic pistols, a shotgun, and dozens of rounds of ammunition. Each weapon was traced, cleaned, and stored for use in enforcement or for sale to other gangs. The police believed that the Cullen gang was not only protecting its operations, but also functioning as a weapons supplier, offering arms for hire to criminal groups across the region. In yet another raid, police discovered a loaded pistol inside a wicker basket at the foot of a bed, a chilling reminder of how embedded violence was in everyday life for the gang. By the summer of 2017, with arrests looming, the Cullen gang made a major shift in strategy. The seizure was 1/4 kilogram of Class A Charlie in Winsford. It rattled them. Anthony Cullen began discussing escape plans and shifting operations away from Class A into Class B production, which was seen as low risk but still profitable. They established links with contacts in the northeast and began shipping Class B grown in converted homes and industrial units. Matthew Spencer, one of their runners, was caught on the A1 motorway in August 2017, with just under £105,000 in cash hidden behind his car seat. Money police believed was from a large Class B shipment. But the game was almost over. In January 2018, the hammer finally dropped. Dozens of officers from Cheshire Police, supported by firearms units and tactical teams, executed a series of dawn raids across Warrington and beyond. These raids were coordinated to the minute, based on months of intelligence. Doors were kicked in, arrests were made, laptops and phones were seized, guns, cash and products were recovered in bulk. In total, 20 individuals were arrested and charged. Hundreds of thousands of pounds in products and cash were seized. The Cullens gang's logistical backbone was dismantled in one stroke. Anthony Cullen was among those arrested. He was remanded into custody and soon faced a catalogue of charges, including conspiracy to supply Class A, conspiracy to possess firearms with intent to endanger life, and money laundering. In court, the evidence was devastating. Prosecutors laid out an organisational structure of the Cullen gang. They showed video surveillance of meetings, shipping logs for weapons, text messages coordinating deliveries, and bank accounts used to launder profits. Witnesses described a gang who ruled by fear and hierarchy. One informant said, "You just didn't say no to them. You didn't miss payments. People just disappeared." Anthony Cullen was convicted and sentenced to 27 years in prison. Other key players received terms ranging from 3 to 18 years. In total, more than 185 years of prison time was handed down. But one man was missing. Leon Cullen had vanished. Meanwhile, an absent Leon found himself name-checked in court during several high-profile trials. He was also linked to several alarming incidents. In February 2018, a grenade was planted underneath a car, parked on a driveway of a family home on Cleveland Road, in Orford, late at night. The explosive device was allegedly placed outside the property, in which children were sleeping upstairs, as a warning on Cullen's behalf, following a string of tit-for-tat incidents with rivals. First came an arson attack at Smithy's gym in Busey, with windows of Leon's home on Lancaster Avenue in Orford bricked up following a fire, when his BMW was torched outside. Then in September 2019, Leon Cullen's associates fired shots at windows and the front door of a house in Bolton before attempting to frame a rival. The Luger pistol used in the shooting, as well as a quantity of Class A, were planted in a car of a man who Cullen was in dispute with, after they'd both been romantically involved with the same woman. An anonymous tip-off was made to the police. On November the 18th, 2019, a 37-year-old man was shot in the stomach in Woolston Park before being dumped outside Warrington Hospital. This incident, also thought to have been related to the gang's activities, coupled with the fact their operation reportedly owed a £200,000 debt to a Salford-based gang, made those close to Leon Cullen a target. Cullen's rivals are Tobins, with a mob boss plotted to gun down not one but two of Leon's associates, including a dealer and his dad. Another target was Cullen's father. In one night, serving soldier Aaron Bretherton travelled from Liverpool in convoy with accomplices before shooting an innocent man on his own doorstep while posing as pizza delivery driver, caused him life-changing injuries. The intended target had been convicted dealer Liam Byrne Jr. after a £10,000 bounty was placed on his head. But he was not at home at the time, and his stepdad David Barnes was shot instead in a case of mistaken identity. A second attack that evening was foiled as another fake pizza delivery man attempted to shoot the twins' father, unwittingly attended his former home address in Longford and left without incident. When police stormed homes across Warrington in January 2018 as part of Operation Samurai, they expected to find both the Cullen brothers. They got Anthony and a host of their lieutenants, but Leon Cullen, the true architect of the gang, he was gone. The man they described as the boss of bosses, Leon Cullen, had anticipated the takedown. Whether they had inside knowledge or simply sensed his walls closing in, Leon fled before the first door was kicked in. His disappearance triggered one of the biggest manhunts in recent British criminal history. Within hours of the raids, authorities confirmed Leon was no longer in the UK. He had used false documents and aliases to escape. But Cullen wasn't living openly under his real name. He was now using false passports and forged identities, posing as a businessman. He adopted a low profile, avoiding social media, and relying on a network of criminal associates who could provide safe accommodation, clean phones, and discreet movement across the city. All the while, Cheshire Police, Interpol, and the National Crime Agency were closing in. For nearly 2 years, UK authorities worked behind the scenes to locate and trap Leon Cullen. In mid-2019, the breakthrough came. Investigators linked one of Cullen's known associates to a series of encrypted communications, intelligence from mobile data and encrypted chat logs. They were similar to the EncroChat leaks that would later rot the underworld in 2020. Meanwhile, efforts to detain Leon, including a £5,000 reward offered to Crime Stoppers, and a van bearing his mugshot, parked outside the Halliwell Jones Stadium on Warrington Wolves match day. That had finally began to bear fruit. Cullen had spent a considerable period of time in Spain before moving to Dubai under a false identity with a fake passport around early 2019. He was living among the rich, high above the desert heat in a skyscraper with valet services and private pools, but under a cloud of fake identities and papers. On January 3rd, 2020, Leon Cullen was arrested by Dubai police in coordination with British officers. The arrest took place without warning. Cullen reportedly surrendered without resistance, but refused to confirm his identity, prolonging the process. Only a handful of images of Cullen emerged during his time on the run. One shown him posing for a selfie in the mirror of a lift while clutching a Louis Vuitton man bag and wearing a flashy watch. His appearance was vastly different to that of his wanted poster. The 2-year anniversary of his escape approached. Detectives finally got their man. Leon Cullen was held on an international arrest warrant, wearing a £23,000 Rolex watch and nearly £5,000 in cash. His arrest was kept quiet while the UK extradition proceedings began, a complicated diplomatic task that involved validating criminal charges, identity verification, and extensive paperwork. He was detained at gunpoint and brutally beaten before being taken into custody, where conditions for prisoners are notoriously harsh. For the first 4 days, he was left alone with a hood on his head in a darkened room before being transferred to a cell where 50 other inmates were residing. His head was shaved and he was forced to wear robes and sandals. He was regularly assaulted by the guards and was not even allowed to access the basics such as toothpaste, leaving Cullen forced to brush his teeth with soap. In February 2021, he was returned to the UK and admitted conspiracy to supply firearms, conspiracy to possess firearms and ammunition, and conspiracy to supply Class A. This came after he was zip-tied and bundled into the back of the car to be handed over to the British authorities. He remained in custody in Dubai for nearly 13 months, while his fate was decided. On February 3rd, 2021, Leon Cullen was flown back to the UK under armed escort. He arrived at Manchester Airport in the early hours of the morning and he was immediately transferred to a high-security facility. Police Commissioner Darren Martland confirmed the extradition, stating the arrest and extradition of Leon Cullen is a result of a lengthy, complex and coordinated investigation. He was the head of one of the most dangerous criminal networks in our region. Now back on home soil, Cullen was finally facing justice. He was charged with conspiracy to supply Class A, conspiracy to possess firearms with intent to endanger life, conspiracy to launder criminal property. The prosecution laid out an entire Cullen empire, from street-level dealers to international sourcing routes. They used seized phones, financial records, witness testimony, and damning images from Cullen's personal laptop, including selfies with cash, guns, and coded messages. In May 2021, he pleaded guilty. Leon Cullen was sentenced to 22 years and 8 months in prison. Judge Patrick Thompson called him a highly dangerous individual who presided over an organisation steeped in violence, intimidation and greed. His weapons arsenal, the judge noted, showed an intent to kill, not just protect, and his escape to Dubai was seen as further proof of his planning. The combined prison sentences for Leon, Anthony and their network now exceeded 200 years. As police promised, the Cullen cartel was officially dead. The arrest, conviction and imprisonment of Leon and Anthony Cullen marked the end of one of the most violent and sophisticated operations in the northwest of England's modern criminal history. But even with the brothers behind bars and their empire in ruins, the legacy of the Cullen cartel continues to echo through Warrington and beyond. The downfall of a powerful criminal gang rarely leads to peace. Instead, it creates a power vacuum. In the months following the Cullens' takedown, Warrington became a battleground for smaller gangs and unaffiliated dealers. The territory and customer base, once controlled with an iron fist, was now up for grabs. Younger, less experienced, and more reckless crews began fighting for turf. Police noted a spike in stabbings and firearm incidents, retaliatory attacks, and dealer-related robberies. Many of these new gangs sought to emulate the Cullen model: organised structure, encrypted communication, gun possession, and even connections to foreign suppliers. But none had the same reach or discipline. Detective Superintendent Aaron Duggan of Cheshire Police later commented, "We disrupted a structure, but that doesn't mean the demand has disappeared. What we've seen is chaos, people trying to fill a role overnight that took the Cullens years to build." What was particularly eerie about the Cullen Brothers' fall is how entrenched their operation had been in everyday Warrington life. Some couriers were school friends of brothers, safe houses were rented from landlords, unaware of what was going on. Weapons were hidden in a child's bedroom drawers, in lofts, and even inside furniture. Members posed as legit entrepreneurs by day and traffic product by night. Even the businesses they used to launder money spot on signs, Future Press Limited, left behind digital paper trails that confused innocent clients and tax auditors for years. Today, remnants of their operations still surface. In 2022, during a routine renovation in a residential home once linked to the Cullen gang, workers found a sealed wall cavity filled with ammunition and burner phones, untouched since the gang's collapse. EncroChat that was cracked in 2020 revealed more links between the Cullens and other gangs across Europe. The National Crime Agency launched a dedicated task force to deal with gang business models, treating criminal operations like financial crimes. But what sets the Cullen saga apart? Its blend of modern business thinking and medieval brutality. This wasn't just dealing and cash, this was crime syndicate with corporate structure, complete with HR-like hierarchies, performance-based incentives, and almost franchise-level expansion models. They didn't just sell product, they branded it. Leon Cullen is currently serving 22 years and 8 months in a Category A prison. He is under close surveillance and reportedly isolated from other high-profile inmates due to the nature of his crimes. Anthony Cullen is serving 27 years. He made no public statements and is considered a high-risk Category A prisoner. Former lieutenants and enforcers like Christopher Potter, Nigel Girk and Matthew Spencer are serving terms ranging from 5 to 16 years. Some have attempted to appeal their sentences, but with little success. Several uncharged associates are believed to have relocated to Spain, Cyprus and Dubai. The National Crime Agency continues to track financial movements tied to the Cullen Brothers, including offshore accounts and crypto holdings suspected of being used to hide profits. Leon and Anthony Cullen are not unique in their desire to dominate the underworld. What sets them apart is how effectively they did it, how far their empire reached, and how long they stayed hidden in plain sight. They were not just gangsters, they were businessmen with guns, strategists who understood both supply chains and street fear. They weren't chaotic, they were cold, professional, and for a time unstoppable. But as history has shown again and again, every empire has an expiry date, especially when built on pain, fear and blood. When the police start to take notice, when your reputation exceeds your visibility, you will have police start looking into you. It happens to them all. The Cullens is a story of both ambition and downfall, a reminder that no matter how high you climb in the criminal world, there's always someone watching, and eventually, the reckoning always comes.